And okay, I think okay, good. So we're live, and just before we start, I've got something to share with you both. Um, Hold on, and share with the rest of the world. Do
All
you want to
right.
see it again? Once more? Perfect. Oh, okay, that's enough.
Three amigos.
The three amigos. Okay, so right, we're streaming. So anyone that's at home, yeah, this is a impromptu Thursday meeting. Generally, I meet with these two other amigos on a Monday, and um, yeah, we shoot the shit and we look at our problems and our sufferings, and we help each other in some ways and prod each other in other ways. And the guys have been very gracious to help me today because I had someone planned for tonight, but they fell out, unfortunately. Oh, I had to change it. Basically, there was a bit too much for them to come on live, and so so we changed it. And yeah, I'm really thankful that I can be with you two here, and I appreciate this this time that you're spending with me and coming and helping me fill this little gap. And I couldn't imagine doing it with two other people um, at all, actually. So thanks for being here.
Mm. Nice to be here. Thanks.
How's everyone going?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah,
I enjoyed our last, we did a session, Luke and I did a session a couple was it yesterday? Yeah,
yesterday.
yesterday. Man, yeah, and I'm still, that session was on kind of self-love or self-hate and I'm still processing some of that I guess. But yeah, nice to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Virginia's nice. We had big snow yesterday, 8 inches. Um, and today it's in the 50s and everything's melting pretty quickly. We had some rain last night. Um, so we'll see if it melts enough for me to go to work next week. Hopeful. But yeah, other than that, Luke and I did a session too. Was it? I
Monday.
guess it was
Yeah.
so interesting, the aftermath. I still get some um, residual from that comes up, but it's just so much less um, than what it was before.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. For me, it's been like, wow, I reckon really two really good sessions this week with both of you. I'd love for people to be able to see them and actually see what it is we're doing. And I had a really strong boost of confidence this week of sort of how valuable what it is that we're doing and for ourselves and then also with each other. Um, I still got this sort of cloud hovering over me, to be honest. We had this quite a like just a horrible sort of situation that happened on the weekend, and it's still ongoing, so I still can't really speak about it. And like it's there, it's there. It's kind of right there. And on Wednesday or Tuesday, I was doing a session just by myself, and I really wanted to do a session on this thing, but I wasn't able to. So it was funny to not be able to, bring something in that's there and have to sort of work around it. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm going pretty okay too. But does anyone have any inklings of today, what you want to have a little look at, or I'm like pretty open today? I had a session this morning with a lady, a sort of a chatting session, and that was quite good. And and then again, this kind of thing that's been going on for me, I've been sort of like in this process of self-inquiry for this last couple of days anyway. So
Mm.
yeah.
The only thing that's coming up for me is still this theme of of love or hate for the for the self, for the perceived self.
Mm,
Um, and today I was looking at it in terms of where I end up kind of unable to speak for myself, like a freeze happens when I'm meeting this outer critic. Like, so the session we did yesterday, Luke, was more about this inner critic, and when it arises, it just sort of bombards me with lots of judgment, and then there's this sense of self-hatred. Like I hate that self, and I'm identifying with all of the critic's judgments, and I'm sort of looking at um, how that's kind of connected with and when an outer critic comes, in other words, in the form of another person, and something in me freezes, and then I'm unable to respond in the way I would like to. And I was listening the other day to this podcast on it was strangely enough on ornamentation, like human ornaments, like I don't know if that was the word that they used, but the use of jewelry and tattoos, ink, anything to kind of ornament the human body. And and he was saying that that ornamentation can come in outer forms, like you kind of create the jewelry yourself, or you create your own clothing style or whatever. Or it can come in this inner form, which would be, he used one example which really stayed with me, which is your no. Your ability to say no, that's not okay with me to another being. And I have struggled with this so much, and there's so much self-judgment that comes out of it because of not being able to say a clear no. Um, and it sort of feeds um, this cycle. Like I go into I have a situation where someone sort of starts coming at me with whatever judgments that they have, whatever they've been sort of triggered by, and um, and this freeze happens. I'm unable to sort of say no, and then it all gets kind of stuck inside me. I get angry afterwards, and I think a lot of the anger is towards myself, like constant questioning of why couldn't I say anything in that moment?
mm,
And I know the freeze has something to do with just childhood trauma and the belief that the other person is right, that whatever they're saying is a true representation of this self. So I take on this identity, and it just all gets a bit convoluted from there. I struggle to be able to say this clear kind of no to someone. And I think a part of it is I'm not able to find the rationale behind the no. Like it might very well be true what that person is saying. And so I play it over in my mind, and then usually it's too late for once I've got it clear, like actually no, that was unfair, or that didn't land very well, or that didn't feel very good. By that time, the situation has already passed, and there's no one for me to actually speak to. So yeah, that's what's sort of still here for me.
I was wondering if I could ask something, Phil. You had said you brought this up a couple of times, and so I'm curious about. You said the other person would say something and it could be true. Do you have an example of that? Like they're pointing something out that's triggering you that you're assuming is true about yourself, or it might be true about yourself. That is there something that comes up for you that
Yeah, the last time something kind of happened when I didn't sort of speak up was with my elder brother, and I'd got a bit annoyed in the kitchen a little while earlier, and he came in and asked me, um, why did I lose my temper? And there's a huge difference for me between losing your temper and getting slightly annoyed. I didn't even express any annoyance. There was just maybe a bit of annoyance in the tone of my voice to him. And then it just felt like this sort of bombardment of judgments afterwards. Like he said, I think you're living too much in your head, Phil, and I'm carrying around 35 years of baggage. And those things, like they they could be true. They can be true. Like I still, even though I've done a lot of work to be more embodied, I can still be too much in my head, and I definitely carry around baggage. I've never actually met a person who doesn't carry baggage. Um, so there was this sort of hesitation to say anything in response, but actually I was kind of angry at the those judgments, but I didn't express the anger, and I definitely didn't express like what I would have liked to have expressed, which was like a clear, hey, that's just not okay. And
Mhm.
the not okay piece is, I think, is what I'm seeing or learning to see at the moment is it doesn't matter if what they say is true or not. Like it still doesn't have to be okay with me. I don't need to have it. I think before I've been looking to see if something that someone else says is true or not before I can respond. But rather than go straight to the feeling, of like whether it's okay with me or not, I end up going into my head and sort of looking at all of the rationale behind the judgments and seeing like, is this true or not?
Can I ask a question? Um, I'm wondering what it is that you had the feeling that he was doing in the questions. Um, um, because I mean, I wasn't there, so it seems sort of, I don't know. I can only sort of, I can only try and understand what you went through, and I don't sort of find that situation for myself in my own mind at the moment. So I'm just curious to know what it was. I guess it's like two sides. What is it that you are sort of that you think that he was doing to you, and then what's the I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's just a good start. What is it that you felt he was doing that required the no?
So there's a sort of a history in all of this around the expression of anger. And when so my dad was this very temperamental man, and I think a lot of my brothers and I were tiptoeing around him a lot of the time to make sure that we didn't incite his anger. And then when my mum left my dad, my brothers and I left with my mum, and think my elder brother sort of took on this role of authority in a way, sort of keeping things in check. And so from as far back as I can remember, in a way, like whenever I expressed any annoyance or irritation or moodiness or definitely anger, it was kind of clamped down upon. So there'd be some statement made like, "Oh, you're so stroppy," was the word that my brother would use. Like, and it always had this tone of contempt with it, and so it always felt like a kind of shutting down of any expression of that feeling. So in this, like I've had a lot of the suppression of anger and all its forms. And in this situation, I was looking at it and sort of seeing like Jim doesn't like any anger or annoyance sort of being directed at him. So I think that sort of I don't like it either. But Jim's more he's more vocal about it, and um, and that's what I think is was happening really. Like there was just him wanting to sort of shut down my um, the expression of my anger and sort of cover it with uh, cover it with judgment. Like so then instead of being me being annoyed at him, then I get a sort
Wait
of
it yourself.
yeah, yeah.
I need to just check in with myself and see if this is some some sort of reciprocal thing comes. Um, because I get the understanding of what you're saying, but I don't have a strong feeling towards what you're saying. Actually, what comes to me is I see you feel, I just see you like losing it, like motherfucker, and just losing it and being like super pissed off in my mind. And 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 then I sort of see you like just storming out basically, or actually, and then coming back in and just saying, hey, just fucking, you know, zip it up. I don't want to hear anything. I'm allowed to get angry. I'm gonna get angry. Just keep your mouth shut. And and then I mean, it's interesting in my mind, like this situation, it seems like your brother's quite sort of rational in this moment, so he doesn't sort of understand what the reason for it. And but I got the sneaky sort of suspicion that he also has been, in my mind, I can see that it seems like he also has been a bit not able to get angry and not able to express it and and then like boys have their fights, they have the big fight and a big blue and they scuff each other up and then at the end they're like laughing and rolling together and actually I couldn't have that with my brother, with my younger brother. um a little bit, but there was a seriousness in it too, but no, that's what I see in my mind. I just see you kind of frustrated and annoyed and And like I see my response to that is a bit fearful. I get a bit afraid myself when I'm around someone that gets a bit angry and sort of loses their shit a bit. And I mean, like Rob, we had this sort of in the session that last time as well. This kind of I've got this cousin that's a bit overbearing and is physically quite strong and he's just like he's a really big man, and his anger, although it doesn't come up very much, but when it gets going, it's scary. So, and it was the same sort of theme too, actually, was this thought of like, no, I'm not going to let the fear take over anymore. I'm just going to stand sort of still and regardless of the consequences, I'm just going to stand here. I'm not going to cower. I noticed in the session that we did with Rob that there was this feeling of cowering, and and then also a bit of like fawning. Trying to placate to not feel that wrath, but at the end of that session, I could see in my mind something had changed, and there was just this sense of standing up and being open to whatever comes, and letting that anger out. Also, like I noticed myself. It's funny because I noticed that old situation was coming in, but then it changed in talking about it to sort of standing up and being a bit more aware and in the moment, even though there was still fear and just saying like exactly what you're sort of talking about. No, no, and and not walking away out of fear, but walking away, with the no type of thing. No.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'm recognizing a lot of placation. Like I'm doing a lot of have done a lot of appeasing of others instead of thinking like when I've thought about the other situations that I've been in, even if there was a chance to sort of go back and speak to that person and then deliver the no then, I haven't because I've some part of me has rationalized a sort of uh, a holier attitude, like
Mm.
be forgiving. Be
Yeah.
forgiving that person. Does it really make any difference what they said to you? And um and I listened to this. It was a very short video the other day about forgiveness, and this woman was sort of saying one of the most forgiving things you can really do is to speak that no, to sort of say like, actually, no, that what you did was not okay with me, and I'm kind of cutting the ties energetically. I'm cutting the ties between me and that other person. This is what she was saying because I don't want that stuff to sort of get into my heart and poison it. Like I want to make that clear sort of separation or cut between me and this other person in that situation. And it would be the most forgiving thing for me and for that other person because I'd speak, I'd the no towards the other person would tell that person clearly that their behavior or their words were not okay.
Mm.
And then they have to kind of think about it for themselves, like and really feel it. And if they get in touch with any empathy there, all the better. Um, and then it's the most forgiving thing for me as well. Again, this is what this woman was saying.
Mm.
Um, because then I don't get entangled in all of that internal sort of conflict
Mm.
that ensues afterwards. And so, yeah, I've just been, I don't know if there is any right or wrong in all of this. I just know that it's a repeating pattern throughout my life for at least 30 years of my life. Um, in fact, even before, yeah, maybe 40 years of my 50. And there's something that is not that I'm not getting correct, that I haven't yet learned, because otherwise this wouldn't be repeating. It wouldn't be continuing to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. What do you reckon, Rob? What's happening for you?
I'm following this, and um, what happens, it's just similar to what happens whenever we meet, is when y'all are describing situations, then I have um, situations that show up for me that are similar to what it is that you're talking about. The freeze is something I'm familiar with, but when he first started talking, when Phil first started talking about it, he said the guy, his brother would say, "You're angry," and um, he would be just slightly irritated or a little annoyed, and so there's a recognition for me that when people interpret my experience for me that doesn't seem to meet my experience, um, I can either get on the defensive with that and try to explain it, um, which never really seems to go well. Um, or I recognize that there's the emotion um, that's there to begin with, and then somebody else interjecting their version of my emotion often will accelerate. And so it may be even more difficult for me to speak with any type of clarity in that moment because I'm already a little frazzled. I'm already there's already some shakiness going on in my body. That seems to be one of the main ingredients that shows up whenever I feel like I'm going to just use the word confrontation, but it could just be an interaction of two people. Um, and I'm trying to say one thing and they're interpreting it or saying that what I'm saying is incorrect about my own experience. So when I get like in that place where I feel a little shaky and a little bit uncomfortable, um, when I feel into that shakiness and that uncomfortableness, um, what I get is images and memories of being young and being shut down. Um, Whatever was showing up for me um, was affecting the people around me, and they needed to shut me down. Control is what it really comes down to. They're trying to control um, from their own state. I didn't know that then, but I can see that pretty clearly now. Um, and then that's always really uncomfortable when I get a sense that when we talked to Luke before, there was like in the conversation, there was the statement the guy made after we played golf, like you're going to, there was an element of control or telling me. And my reaction to that was just um, one of complete uncomfortableness and recognition that in that particular moment, I really didn't have the words to describe what it was that um, what I really wanted to say. So it took me about 5 minutes to come up with, just drop me off at the house, um, which he took, um, uh, is, I guess, me not what, however he took that.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that, and the words power play kind of come up in that. Is this um, It's something to do with power. And in there's a real fear in me of powerlessness. And I think that's heightened by this inability to actually speak what I want to speak in those circumstances.
It,
So,
it, it, it seems to trigger a construct based on the past. In other words, you said something that was really pertinent to my experience too, is that, for the last 40 years, this thing has been reoccurring for you. And that I see that in my own experience too, these reoccurrences that show up. I know them today to be a form of conditioning, a form of triggering my inner body and mind to react to whatever's going on in a particular way. Um, and then there's some more residual to that, whereas really don't like that happening. And in that moment, it can really take me over. And then, and this has become less, but it's still there. There's the recognition that it did take me over, and then I can get angry with myself that that I allowed it to take me over. That I was like, gosh, can't you stay present? Can't you allow that to come? Which is just more mental stuff coming in saying that I need to try to be a certain way when all this is going on, right? Which obviously doesn't fit what was actually happening. So it really has no value. But because I grew up being criticized so often, I took on the role of self criticizing um, as really part of my, and it's not as strong as it used to be because of this type of work. I've looked at it a lot, but it's still kind of the go to if I'm not really on my game at the time.
yeah, and one of the things you were saying earlier about when someone interprets the events or the feelings or whatever for you, and there's this sort of rise of a fire in me, like I definitely recognize that, and I've really had enough of it. Um,
Mm.
it's the I'm coming to really hate people's opinions about about things in general, I guess, but especially when it comes to me, like there is no inquiry into it. It's why I like this work, is because as a facilitator, you're pushed into a position where whatever opinions you have, you got to put them aside and ask questions to discover in someone else, to explore what is going on for someone else. And the same in self-inquiry, and the same when you're being facilitated by someone else, you're pushed to sort of to release any expectations or agendas or opinions, and to really explore like what is actually going on here, what's beneath all of the stories in the head, and what is underneath those criticisms, like who's the voice of that inner critic, because it's not necessarily just some wounded child. I was listening to this woman talk about this, a woman called Tara Moore, who's like a coach and an author, and she wrote a book relate on the inner critic for women, and interviewed loads and loads of women, and their experiences of their childhood was really varied. So some had a really loving parents, some had very critical parents, but their experience of the inner critic was very, very similar. So it didn't matter if they had a good childhood, a good upbringing, whether they had enthusiastic parents, parents who really supported them, or parents that criticized them. They still had the same inner voice, kind of beating them down when they were at the edge of their kind of comfort zone. And so it just makes me wonder, like, where did this evolve from? Is it all just about a kind of sense of survival, or I mean, this voice of the critic?
So you said something earlier. I'm going to try to return us to and just see if this goes anywhere. And that is, um, I've really come to, I'm not sure if you use this word, but hate the opinions of others. It
Yeah.
just seems that that statement is really rich with um, whatever's in the background of that, whatever's coming up that's formulating that type of view of hating the opinions of others. And it's the reason it's stuck because I can relate. I can relate to just almost like wanting to either shut them down to begin with or avoid it. But what's really going on there? And that's what I was really curious about. Like, what is it doing to me? What is others' opinions? How is that landing in me that I would want to avoid or get away or whatever mechanisms there?
Yeah, so I can, as you speak about that, I can feel my jaw tightening, my teeth sort of clenching, and images of supermarkets, interestingly. And this has come up with several different people in my life, and people who go grocery shopping with me, for example. And it's like I pick something out. I generally like to do the shopping by myself because I hate this it's an interference. That's the good word for it. It's like I have a thought process sort of going on, and maybe this is related to a some kind of comfort zone, but my thought process is quite clear. And I know I need these particular items from a supermarket or a grocery store. And then someone interferes with that thought process and sort of says like, oh, we have those at home, or what wouldn't you like this, or wouldn't you like that? And and there's this feeling of being controlled, of like someone else's opinion wanting to sort of take over a my own focus or direction. And so the grocery store is just like the first example that comes up for me, but there are many others that feel more sort of serious. But it's like the the feeling that those others, the opinions of others are trying to control me, are trying to be an authority over my behavior. And there's a sort of clenching inside, like with a voice just sort of saying, don't. Just don't fucking try to control me in that way, or just leave me alone, leave me be, leave me to my own devices, or something like that. Um,
How does that make you feel? What's the feeling when somebody comes in and does that? Because I relate 100%. I'll try to control the outside so that I don't have to deal what's going on with me on the inside.
well, you mentioned one of the feelings. I'm trying to sort of connect with them with what's coming up right now, but I'm noticing that there's a that it's dependent on my own mood. Uh, so, for example, if I'm really tired, a little bit kind of grumpy, irritable, then my feeling gets to a place of real anger
Mm.
and expressed by the words, like I said earlier, like just don't fucking try to control me, or just leave me the fuck alone. Leave me to my own devices. I want to be left alone. If I'm just in a neutral mood, then it doesn't seem to instill so much anger. I don't know, it touches into a sort of irritation, as though something's there's a friction, like their words are kind of grating on my skin,
Mm.
and it's similar, but it's similar response in words, but it's toned down. Like, could you just leave me alone, leave me to do my own thing at the moment. And I think there's a almost a contraction, which I'm witnessing very subtly at the moment. It's like everything just sort of tightens a bit. The energetic field around my body, it sort of shrinks. Whereas before, when I'm just left to my own devices, I can, I'm fairly expansive, just getting on with my own thing, minding my own business. I'm at peace. And it's like it's that disturbance of peace, the interference of a of my peace, or the interference of um,
Can I just jump in here
sure.
just a little bit? Just it seemed like you were saying two different things just then. Um, because you were saying when you're neutral and someone is sort of trying to do that controlling thing that it doesn't affect you so much. But then this situation with your brother, you were maybe feeling a bit frustrated and a little bit already on edge. And then what he was doing was like whatever he was doing was that grating feeling, you know? And it just came into my mind that when that's happening for me, usually what's happening within me is that I'm trying to control something. I'm trying to not feel something, basically. Say I'm really tired or I'm a bit angry, and say my wife is saying something to me. And and what I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to do something with my attention in a way. And what she's doing is she's trying to do something else with my attention, which might mean that I can fall into that feeling of fear or fall into the thing that I'm trying to sort of escape from. Um, I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily saying that's what's happening for you, but there was just that little contradiction there, just in the end, about this idea that you were saying that you've got this peace, and someone's come in and disturbed that peace. But I wonder if it's actually peace that you're talking about. That if it's not like some equilibrium with a different feeling that's here, or I don't know.
Well, it's not meant, I don't think it's a contradiction. It's just like that's the word that sort of pops up. Uh, Um, I could say a relative peace in 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 relation to um, sort of full-on frustration or something. But you're absolutely right, and everything you described, I just used the words interference. That's the interference. Is like I think I am in those at those times. I like what you said in terms of the control. Like somewhere I'm trying to control um, the outcome of an event, like going to the grocery store or whatever. Like I have it all in mind. Like that's my focus. I know what I need to do and get, and I have in my mind an expectation of how things, how that whole situation is going to turn out. And so in some ways I'm trying to control life by sticking to that expectation, like making sure that expectation goes the way I plan it to to go. And then someone kind of interferes with it and brings in something that I have always been trying to avoid, which is the irritation. Like I don't like the feeling of irritation. I don't like the feeling of frustration. It leaves me a little bit powerless. Frustration does. Irritation leaves me feeling a bit powerless, but I don't think it's the irritation itself. I think it's just my relationship with all the whole spectrum of anger. I don't know what to do with it. Hmm.
Can I? Sorry, keep going. No, just keep going.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know how to express it in a healthy way, especially in public.
Yeah.
If I'm on my own, then I do exactly kind of what you talked about, like what you were seeing earlier, Luke, in me, like getting all kind of getting irritated, storming off or whatever, and then kind of having a I can't remember what words you used, but like a full-on tantrum or something, and that felt quite close to the reality of things. Like my anger sort of gets suppressed, not quite sure how to let it sort of flow out and be expressed. And so sometime later it's going to explode. It's going to come out in a sort of tantrum where I've been learning to try to allow some of these tantrums. So I've been kind of acting like a gorilla, for example. I beat my chest. It feels like a kind of and grit my teeth and make a noise, and it feels like some little release of that energy. But I think yeah, there's this discomfort, there's this feeling of powerlessness when those different levels of sort of anger arise, because I don't know, I haven't had enough practice of
I might have another like so as you were talking just before, I was like watching within myself and somehow the anger started coming up within me, you know. And I was sitting there and I was watching it and the thought came, what is it that's stopping me from getting angry in this moment with, like, say, my cousin, right? What is it that's stopping me from getting angry in the moment? And yes, I've done all the like looking of the fear and the response to the anger outside of me, but what's stopping me in that moment from getting angry? And and then what came was like I followed it through. I got angry in my mind, or it went through and I got angry in my mind. And then there was this feeling of shame afterwards, you know, feeling of really being really bad and having this strong feeling of shame and then not wanting to feel that shame. And that's part of the reason that I don't want to get angry because I feel ashamed at the end of it all, or in the past. And then it's kind of went out of sequence in my mind. But then I was listening to you and you were talking about this moment where someone's telling you something, you know, you're like someone was saying, or your brother was saying to you that you're angry, but you're actually just frustrated. And what happened to me was I sort of I don't know if it was a memory, but I came to this point of myself as a young child, right? And the parents saying, "Oh, you're just tired. You're just tired. It's time to go to bed. It's time to go to bed," you know? And then me being like, "No, you know, no, no, no," and being able to have a tantrum as a child because there's no repercussions, you know? But then for some reason needing to define myself from what they're saying, that they're wrong. And that even though they might keep saying it over and over, and maybe that pushes me down or stops me from being genuine with what's actually happening for me. I mean, this is all as a child, so it's kind of something like this, you know. I had this like movement through there of me saying no, 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 and not really being heard at that time. And and also doubting myself. Hey, there's another part was that was that I really related with this because it happens with my wife, even just today in the afternoon. Um, and the sequence goes for me like this: that I like there was something about also about what you're saying about going to the shop and getting specific things, but there was but say with my wife, I might say, hey, let's go and do this, or hey, let's today it was something specific. Yesterday it was like, hey, let's go to the swimming pool, right? And immediately she said, no, no, we're not going to do that. And it made me just get like really fucking angry. And I know didn't make any sense, you know, but I just sat with it a little bit and I said to her, hey, that really fucking pissed me off. And I was like, okay, and then as you were talking, I'm like, why did it piss me off? And it pissed me off because for a few reasons. One was that it was kind of just a whim thing. You know, it was like a off the top of the head, hey, let's go to the swimming pool. I didn't fully feel like going to the swimming pool, so I could let go of it really easily. But then there was also other stuff tied in, like this idea of being told what to do and the authority of her saying no. And my wife knows my wife's not like this. She knows what she wants and she does it. And then she knows what she doesn't want and she doesn't. And it's connected to her body. She's like, this feels good. I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to give all my energy here. And whenever something comes up that she's not, and it's not the best way to be for sure, because there's times where you need to Like there's times where, and she's pretty good at this too, like the way she describes it is if there's chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream, she likes chocolate. She's going to have chocolate every time. But if there's only vanilla ice cream and she wants ice cream, she's not going to suffer by eating the vanilla ice cream. So that's the way she describes it to me. But I like the insights that are coming for me are, okay. Um, there was a need that I was like, there was a need that I had, a very subtle need that I had by saying to her, "Hey, let's go to the swimming pool," you know, because it was something. It was like some need of being, I don't know. I can just sit here. That was like quite a ramble, but but
No, that was nice. And the piece about actually, Robert, do you have any response before I respond?
I mean, this has just brought some clarity to me around the whole thing and different instances that have showed up. And it may not go over well, me terming it this way, but it's a classic example of shadow work, of Ken Wilber's shadow work. And the two examples that show up that were real, I mean, you had said something about the pattern, and I look at it as a theme, like a reoccurring theme over and over again. And then the theme is the me. And if I can't find the me and I can't get comfortable with what's really happening, then it just continues. If I can't see it, I can't bring clarity to it. It's just that simple. And it was a while ago, my wife and I were shopping together, and she said something about, don't we think we need to pick up something? And I got really angry. Um, and I was just like, I know what I'm doing. You don't need to tell me what I need to go do. I know what I'm doing. I'm 60 some years old. I've been to the grocery store. I know it. So the anger really came up. Um, and the me that was in that, right, was the one who knows what he's doing. It's like there's something in there that I don't think I know what I'm doing, and she triggered that and brought that to the surface. I didn't see that for original, and I didn't even look at it for the. I just was really angry with her, and it's like I'm not going to the grocery store with her anymore. This is ridiculous. How come I got this? So then I'm really caught up in the loop, of all of this, and then it took probably 4 or 5 days, and all of a sudden I was like, what is really going on with me here? What is really happening? Because that's the value of this work. If I can't get to that, then I just stay suffering, and it's self-created. You may not like, people don't like hearing that, but I'm doing it because I'm not, I can't stop doing it. Right? It's not like I'm purposely harming myself, but I'm in a loop. And so and then it reoccurred. I guess it was we had 8 inches of snow, and we got a beautiful place here, a nice house. It's on a gravel driveway, and the driveway is really uneven. It's got big slopes and stuff. And I got a tractor, and if you've ever tried pushing snow around on gravel, it's not easy, especially because you put the bucket at a certain height, and then you're on a slope, so you keep digging it, so you got to keep moving the bucket. It's really challenging to move all this, and it was freezing cold. It's probably 10 degrees out, and I'm out there on that tractor, and I'm moving stuff around, and I get it clear so that we can get in and out of our driveway. And she comes out and goes, "I can't believe you got gravel in the yard. And you, God, how come you put these?" And I was just like, I was furious. I mean, I was like, I'm working my ass off here, and but again, like what's that reaction really all about? This is what, like, what's really going on with me? That's the question I have to get to, because as long as I keep putting it on them, which is what I did most of my life. I just lived in the victim mentality of, fuck these people, they just need to leave me alone. I'm going to go live by myself somewhere where I don't have to deal with nobody, and then I'll be a lot happier. Which then I won't be, because then I got to deal with me and my looping head all the time, and that's not going to be too happy. Um, so I started looking at it, and she was challenging me again on, like, I'm doing it wrong. You don't know what you're doing. You're doing it wrong.
wrong,
And
Rob.
it's, yep. And so that's it. And so that's the me. When I say theme, the me, That was the me, the one who's wrong, who doesn't know what he's doing. And apparently that's in my system. And when she talks about something like that, she's given me, it's one of two things. She's either given me the opportunity to pull up what's in the background and see what's going on, or I'm in an unconscious way into the same patterns that I've always been in, the operating system that I developed through my childhood. And I'm going to cut her down and, maybe point out some stuff that she doesn't do that well either. Or what I did do is say, next time we get 8 inches of snow, you're right there, you're going to clear it. See how well you can do, which is all that's the me. That's the one who can't do it wrong, really whining about the fact that and really what's there is I'm not able to see that to begin with. I'm not able to see that reaction. And so the feeling and the story that comes up is showing me what's still sitting in my system that I developed in my lifetime that I have a chance now to either work with and be with, which isn't easy. We all know how difficult this fucking work is. But it's me taking responsibility for my reaction and starting to, and what I have found in this work is the more I see it, the less it has power on me. But I have to, some people can see it. I have to see it over and over again. That's why I keep meeting with you guys, is because if I stop and I just kind of go away from this work, I have that tendency to fall back into my own mind, my own operating system, and just kind of start. And there's more suffering there than when I am doing this work. That I am aware of. That I'm a lot freer when I'm looking and asking those questions, like what's really happening with me, what's really going on here.
Mm. Yeah. One of the things that Luke made aware earlier when he was speaking, you were speaking, Luke, was about needs. Like, what is the need here underlying all of this? And one of the things you brought up for me, Rob, was this sense of worth. And it's like, I think this is just one of my needs, but when I don't get it from another, when I'm sort of subconsciously expecting it, I'm expecting some well done or yeah. So in that example of the tractor clearing the driveway, and the response is kind of, why did you get gravel all over the yard? It's like it's again, it's an interference pattern to an expectation that I've already sort of set in my mind somewhere, but not consciously. Like yeah, I can see that a lot of the time it's not conscious, but under the surface there's sort of looking when other people are involved. There's a looking for, I mean, maybe just the simplest word is approval, but there's a worth in my work, a worthiness in the outcome of something that I do, um, that I'm looking to sort of be reflected or projected from someone else. And if I don't get that, the yeah, the reactions to it are kind of can be surprising. And sometimes the little, again, depending on mood, they can be quite angry. Like, what the fuck? Like, how the fuck can you say that? Like, gravel all over the driveway? I just cleared all of this snow, for God's sake. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it'll just play on my mind for quite some time.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I did do some work on it and felt like I got to a place where I was really clear. And apparently I struck a nerve with her. For about 4 days later, she comes up to me and she goes, I just want to let you know the driveway looks good. And I immediately had a reaction to that. Oh, you're just saying that because, I mean, I could, so which is again, somebody's touching that's still there. And I thought that, but she came about it in a different way. She wasn't coming up and complaining, which is the work I had been doing on it, right? she had been complaining. She had actually come up and complimented, and it didn't seem
Genuine.
sincere,
Yeah.
and it seemed like it was coming from a place. So again, the system reacted to that, which really that surprised me because I thought, well, I didn't think I was completely. I mean, I don't ever think I'm done with this, but the strength of it came up, and I was like, wow, she just complimented me, and I'm like, oh, go fuck off, or whatever, I wasn't thinking that, but it was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. You're still doing it next time.
So, so somewhere under the surface, there's like I'm seeing this in me that there's already a belief that I'm unworthy or something. So I'm looking for it from other people. And when I don't get it, I get angry. When I do get it, I kind of get defensive in a sort of a strange way. Like I brush it off or sort of say, oh no, no, that's not,
Yeah, yeah.
or it was nothing or something. Like it won't fully land. Their compliment won't fully land with me. And that's sort of bringing me back to what I talked with you about, Luke, yesterday, this the sort of sense of identity. Like, what is it I'm identifying with, and which part of my identity is the one who's speaking in any given moment, especially the self-hate, the one who hates me, or the one who says I should be different in some way. And I'm trying to, and I emphasize the word trying, to sort of come back to some kind of central position where I recognize these different parts. I recognize the voices, and instead of identifying with what the critic is actually saying I am, like, oh, I'm worthless, or oh, I'm this, I'm that, or any other judgments that are coming, just naming it as like, oh, I recognize that voice. That's that critic. And then there's a kind of capacity for this, yeah, capacity. There's a sort of container for self-love. Like I can say, I can hear that critic's voice, recognize like, oh, I don't need to identify with that. That's just a voice in my head. Can I sort of bring love? And it stays as a question. Like I don't have a full answer of, oh yeah, definitely I love all these aspects of myself. But just the question itself seems to bring a space to that contracted self, like the one who I said earlier in the supermarket kind of gets a bit tight and contracted and so on. Some space is created just by the ability to ask that question is, can I love this too? Whatever the critic is saying, can I just give some allowance to it, some acceptance?
And the suffering seems to come with identification to it, with the identification to the idea that I'm unworthy or I'm worthless or inherently there's something the matter with me or I can't do things right or to the point that I identify with like that feeling as an actual person, I suffer. And then it loops and goes on and on and on and on. And there's been an ongoing discussion where you know can you see that that's you also? And the moment that I identify with it and see that that's me also, right? Then there's identity there, and I hold that in a way that seems to be instead of letting it pass through, instead of seeing it for what it is, a construct, part of my operating system that I developed over years, and it comes and goes. The more I've seen that, the less power it has. It's like almost seeing it and then it's gone. It's like boom, it's gone, boom, it's gone. And then there's times where it's like you said, I'm tired or I'm a little hungry, or I may have been watching a lot of TV. I noticed that's when it happens. So I'm in that state of being mesmerized anyway. And so I'm just all of a sudden attending to all of my thinking, almost getting wrapped up in it as if it's the reality of my life.
Mm.
Instead of recognizing that it plays a purpose, thinking is really, really fucking helpful. And feelings have a lot of, for me anyway, they're very intuitive and informative. Like being hungry or having to go to the bathroom or getting 104 temperature. Those types of feelings for me have been helpful. But when I identify with that feeling as actually being me, like it can't you also see that that's you too? I really can't. I really can't. not when we're doing inquiry, but when I'm sitting there by myself, I can certainly take that on as being who I am, you
Mm,
know,
mm,
and that
Um,
creates suffering. That in and of itself is the thread of suffering. Because without that, where's the suffering? You know, but as soon as I go, yeah, I'm worthless, or the like one of the big ones for me is because of fear is anger. Like it's not okay to be angry. In my household, it wasn't okay to be angry. Or if I cried, if I was sad, then I was a sissy. I was a baby. So those two things, both of those two things, it's like there was a lot of conditioning around that. And I literally had to shut that down and then layer it with different ways of thinking. And then every time we started to go there, it would be just terribly uncomfortable, terribly uncomfortable.
mm, mm.
all of this is kind of reminding me of something. It's making me think about this sort of woman that I'm seeing um, in the
Let your
week.
wife go
No,
ahead,
no,
son.
no,
Could help me.
no, 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 no. It's okay. But it's like it's sort of reminding me of this exercise that a friend of mine sort of suggested, and it's this one where you um, you take the duality because this it's a comparative thing, right? All identity is relative. It's comparative in some way. And so worthless and wanting to be worthy or feeling themselves to be worthy, it's like a two-way street. And and she's stuck on one side very heavily, and Um, so anyway, all of this is reminding me about this exercise of really what's happening, like in the simplest form, when we identify in some way, there's a thought that's going in the mind and a feeling that's going in the body, right? In the simplest way, every single time, it's only ever that. And sort of what's happening is there's some thoughts and sensations that we don't like, and there's some that we want that we've experienced before, and we want to try and bring them back, and that's this comparison. And this friend of mine, his exercise was to have this kind of thing like this, where in your mind you step over into the worthlessness consciously, the sense of worthlessness, and you let that sort of storm come, and you maybe you're already there to start with, you get the feeling of that. Often too, when we're in some state of non-flux, it gets a bit hard to discern what's actually going on because there is no comparison. You're like it's the norm is to have that tension and saying when you get in the water that you feel like oh shit. So anyway, so he steps over into this sense of worthlessness and he feels how that is and the posture of that and all the thoughts and memories and whatnot that come up in that regard. And then he like consciously takes a step back into this neutral position, like this fulcrum point, right? Where he can see that over there, and I guess he's a therapist, so he talks to his clients and he says, you can pick that back up at any time, but just for the moment, leave that thought and all of that just over there. Step back into that neutral position and then step over into the other side of the worthiness. And like the interesting thing is that we've all felt a time where we've been good, where we've been pat on the back or maybe that's a generalization, but if we stay with this thought of I'm worthy and notice what comes up into the mind, then at some point there'll be some version of ourselves that is worthy that comes up into the mind. And usually with self-inquiry, because we stay with that one side and then naturally it turns over into the other side through self-inquiry. If we stay with it long enough, if we mine a little bit, then it'll become the other side. But he's just doing this just as a straight exercise. So he steps back into this neutral position, then steps over into this worthiness position, or I am enough, or I am loved. And what this is reminding me of is with this woman, I at the end of the session, I was saying to her, that what is this, because she wants all of this stuff. She wants all of this special, she wants to be loved in a particular way, have particular things happen, and all this kind of stuff. And so I was saying to her, what's that look like when you are that successful? How does that feel in the mind? And so she's opening up that other side to step over there and to feel that sense of worthiness. And um, I don't know, maybe it's like anger as well, anger and not anger, or whatever the situation is. But then again, he takes that step back into the neutrality again. So it's not about becoming one or the other. It's about like being used to the feeling and the thought that comes with one or the other, so that it's not so frightening, and there's a realization of like, oh, you know what, that this sense of being awesome is going to change into something else. And then also recognizing that, oh, that there is a little bit of a choice here. If I can recognize and see what's happening over here, then I do have a choice to step out of that in some ways and step over into this side. And I don't necessarily, like, for me, the ultimate release of all of this is that, that all of these thoughts of ourselves are just that, thoughts of ourselves. I can't experience the actual Luke. Like, I can't experience the actual depth of myself. I can experience Luke as a thought all the time, and only in that way. Um, I forgot where I was going. Anyway, I like that. I like that exercise. I like that, like the choice of it, especially if someone's deep in like a depression or something like that, and you can't take them deeper into it because they don't see that there's still separation. They don't see that 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 the story that they're telling about it and the there's still a gap there. They can't go deeper into it. So
Which is
so
why I think resourcing is so helpful because it gives people a platform to land on so that you don't fall too far on one side or too far on the other. And I think it really depends on where people are, in their journey. And so what you're saying, I used to do the same thing with therapists. I'd sit in one chair and talk to this, and then I'd go and get in the other chair. So it was the exact same
yeah,
experience. So you get the chance to feel what it's like to feel good and feel what it's like, and then to be a choice. But and that I think is really valuable. Um, but there's so much of it for me that just happens unconsciously based on the environment that I'm in, that it all triggered up. That I really, what Scott's work really helped me with was to see where it was all coming from to begin with, see the constructs that had been put into place that I thought that I wasn't good enough. Like that was the main theme. My grandfather was a Rhodes Scholar. My dad was CEO of a bank. I wasn't good enough. I couldn't go through school. I made all D's. I wasn't very smart. I couldn't use. So I had all this story background. So what did I do when I got sober and I found this work? I started reading every book I could get my hands on, listening to every podcast, so I could start presenting myself as being smarter and smarter. So the underlying current was running what was going on so that I could try to present the self in a different way. So I had both sides of that, not the duality. And it wasn't until I could see that clearly from that place of neutrality, right, where I wasn't identifying, and I still do. I still identify, it still comes up, still grabs me, but I have seen it clearly more times than I can ever count, and done sessions where you just end up in that open space of knowing, just being aware, and just that the depth of myself is what I experience there. It's like the laughter just starts to naturally come, and the enjoyment is just there, and there's doesn't seem like anything can kind of touch you, and you're just free of self in that moment. And then life, environment, all that stuff
comes back
pull
in.
the trigger, and I get triggered again. And
Mm.
I've never, I think Scott did a good job in pointing that stuff out when he was talking about people that were claiming to be awake but were still stealing money and sex, and there was still a lot of stuff going on in the background of people's lives. So I just think that this work that we do here, uh, depending on where people are, depending on their understanding of how they're able to process this has been probably the most valuable thing that I've ever found, because it altered my experience. It allowed me to see that I didn't consciously make decisions to process things in a harmful way to myself. They just kind of came about based on how I was being judged, the environment that I was in, how I was being talked to, what people were saying to me, and how I personalized all that and took it in. And but it's been the
It's
biggest.
interesting. In this next few days, I want to do this. I actually want to do a second part of this, like this Jesus thing. I got this Jesus. I've got a Christian friend, and I did this self-inquiry based on this idea that I was wrong about Christianity, just to try and find a common ground with him. And and the next one I want to do is about sin. You know, this idea of original sin, and that we're and it's interesting just what you were talking about then, because where does it start? You know, you can say that I'm not necessarily saying one thing or the other, I'm just like musing a bit here, but where does it start? Because you could say that the parents did it and that their parents did it. And I wonder if if some insight has come in some way that we've, um, do you sort of get a grasp of what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, no,
the
I hear you. I mean, that's
original
it.
sin, and
That's
I like the Course in Miracles kind of version of.
or Anthony Danello. If you've ever read some of Anthony Danello's books, he's
Mm,
really spot on. And if you're gonna if you've never listened to or read Adyashante's book Resurrecting Jesus, he
mm,
talks about it in a completely different way. He talks about it in the way of transformation
mm,
and how transformative it would come. And I mean, there's a real beauty to people that are able to articulate things that kind of go to the source of my understanding. And all of a sudden, I start questioning my understanding, right? It's like I'm holding on to this firm grasping of, and Phil's done that a number of times when he's talked about like healing through, um, I can't remember the words that you use, but basically through wholeness and through faith and through, these types of things. And there is a lot of evidence that those things are extremely powerful depending on where a person is in their life. I mean, if you go talk to an atheist about faith and you're trying to help them heal, chances are you're not gonna get through unless you can talk to them in a way that kind of opens the door. And that's when the first thing Phil said was his brother said, "You are this," and immediately the response that I have was, if people could just get to a place where they're asking a question instead of making a statement. Like, Phil, are you a little irritated right
Hey, that's
then you
beautiful.
get a chance to articulate what's going on instead of going, "Hey, man, looks like you're fucking angry." And
Yeah,
then automatically you're on the defensive and it brings up all the shit that's
yeah,
on but people are where they are. So to say, if we
You could
could,
write you could write a book with that title, Rob. It's a kind of beautiful sentence. People
say
could
it
get to
again.
that place where they're asking a question instead of making a statement.
That's nice.
I've got to go in a minute,
Yeah,
guys. Just
yeah,
just one last thought to
yeah.
add into the mix, based on what you've both been saying, was kind of related to asking a question, and it's like a sort of self-directed. So when a lot of the problems seem to come when, like when you were talking, Luke, about this exercise, there's a somatic quality to that exercise because you're actually stepping physically into one place and then using that place to sort of represent a specific experience. And
Mm.
then you're stepping back into a neutral zone and then stepping into another area. And I think what that helps to do is just to create space, which I think is the same as asking a question. It creates a sort of a space of possibility. But when an experience is so intense for me that, or just when an experience is really intense, it tends to contract around me. The actual experience seems to have this create it creates a tightness in everything, in my body, in my brain, in my mind, my emotions. And so there's no space to see any other possibility. I can't do that comparative work that you mentioned, sort of this is based on comparison. Everything that we think about ourselves or think of ourselves is based on a comparison with everything else. But if I'm just in the space of like I'm worthless or I'm no good or I'm a failure or whatever, that's all I can actually see. But just a little question, like you were saying, Rob, just seems to open that space enough to be able to see a different possibility. And when there's the space to do that, then I can make a comparison. I can see like, oh, there's some light over there. Actually, I might not be as worthless as I think I am. And yeah, that's what was sort of coming up for me when you were both speaking about different things, but it seems
Can
relevant.
Practical.
I just
So,
add one more thing here? And I don't know if this will help or not, but one of the things that I've noticed, and one of my practices when we were practicing beginning learning to be facilitators was just learning how to listen, right? That open listening where you absolutely know that there's no what the next sound is going to be. It all of it, and you don't know where the space it's coming from, whether it's behind you, in front of you, and the field just opens and then the sound comes in. When when I can listen to somebody in that way, then things kind of come and go, and I'm able to operate from a different place. When I'm listening to people and I'm in my mind, and I'm already thinking as I'm listening to them, that's I'm already in the conditioning to begin with, and it just and that's where I go into the triggering stuff. So I've noticed the difference between those two types of listening. Like, and I've got a bad habit of interrupting people when they're talking. So I'll be in my mind and they'll be talking, and I've got to jump in. And just because I'm already in the conditioning, but when I can sit in that open space and really listening from noticing, I'm not just hearing them, but I'm hearing what's going on around me. And so I'm not immersed into the conditioned mind, then I can respond to people in a completely different way. It really depends on, um, you know, where I am in that moment, what's going on in that moment.
yeah,
Mm.
I agree 100%. Well, thanks, boys.
Yeah, thank you.
Interesting.
Are we on for next Monday?
Hey, just 1 second. I just want to say goodbye to everyone at home. Bye, everyone at home. I hope you enjoyed. It was quite an
Bye, Rob.
interesting conversation, and the three amigos. Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Rob.
Thanks,
Thank
Luke.
you.